Hello, I'm Nipper Reed.
And I'm Phil Wolf.
So, settle down, have a nice cup of tea, and enjoy the Venomous Exchange Radio podcast.
Crumpets, Nipper. I want the crumpets.
Well, as you've been such an extraordinarily good boy.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, my name is Phil Wolf, and I'm joined by the one and only Mr. Nipper Reed.
Hello, everybody.
And tonight we have a very, very special guest, a guest that Nipper and I have been following his work for as long as we can remember. An amazing field herper, a master educator, the one and only Mr. Johan Marais.
Hi, guys.
With over 40 years of experience and several books authored, including The Complete Guide to Snakes of Southern Africa, Johan is one of the leading authorities on African herpetofauna. Johan is also the originator and operator of the African Snakebite Institute, or ASI.
The ASI provides a variety of resources for snake awareness, first aid for snakebite, as well as venomous snake handling courses. These courses are accredited by the International Society of Zoological Sciences. Through the ASI, Johan has founded the ASF, the African Snakebite Foundation. The foundation's goal is to establish over 20 antivenom banks throughout southern Africa, where both polyvenom and monovalent antivenom will be available 24 hours a day.
So, Johan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, it's like I was saying, Nipper and I have watched your stuff for a really long time, and you produce amazing educational videos and literature and training courses. And, you know, we're talking about guests to have on the show, and you're at the top of the list, sir. So it's an honor to have you on the show.
100%. I mean, it really is an honor to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. I just do what I love. That's about it.
That's cool. I mean, the obvious question we have to ask you is what started it all off? I mean, there's a lot of things to do in South Africa. Why are you crawling around in the dirt looking for dangerous snakes?
Yeah, it started as a youngster, probably 5-6 years old. I grew up in Durban, which is on the East Coast, and came across a snake in the garden, and my mother insisted that it be killed. It turned out to be a harmless brown house snake. And then visits to relatives on farms all over the country. We had a few uncles who farmed in different parts, the drier northern parts of the country, parts of Mpumalanga, Highveld. And every instance where there was an interaction with a snake, and there were many of them, the snake got killed, always. It was always the same story. And at the time, there wasn't much literature. So it was very difficult to learn about them. So what I had to do initially, around 10, 11, 12 years old, is if I got a hold of a snake, it went into a container, and I'd go along to Fitzsimmons Snake Park, which was on the beachfront. But unfortunately, Fitzsimmons Snake Park, after Fitzsimmons died, his accountant, Ray Parker, took over. And Ray was an accountant. He was not a herpetologist. So he didn't share much information. You know, if you took a snake along there, he was also quite an introvert. So he would open the door halfway and sort of lean through the door wearing a white coat, as pharmacists do. And you'd say to him, "Hi, Mr. Parker, what snake is this?" And he'd say, "Well, that's a brown house snake." "Oh, do they eat lizards?" "No." "Do they eat mice?" "Yes." "Do they eat frogs?" "No." And you had to drag the information out of him. So it was tough going because we didn't really have role models. We had no one that taught us anything, and it was tough going.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
So after your initial, when you're 12 years old, crawling around looking for your venomous snakes, how did you progress into? Did you keep snakes, like as we would call modern snake keepers now, or how did that progress?
Yes, always had a few snakes in vivariums somewhere, but not much of a collection. And then in my sort of mid to late teens, I started keeping more. I had was living with my father, and in the lounge we had the black and green mambas. In the dining room we had the vine snakes and the boomslang and rinkels and a few cobras, and an outside enclosure with a whole bunch of stuff, various sand snakes and house snakes and a whole bunch of stuff. And in the bottom of the garden, I had a Nile crocodile of about 1.25 meters in length called Gabriel.
Wow.
Excellent parenting.
Yeah, and that was the sort of the collection. Then at the age of about 17, I had a visitor. Someone found out from the local pet shop that I was buying mice, and he worked out that I kept snakes, and he came to visit. And his name was Raymond Taylor. And Raymond was older than me, very enthusiastic, and he pointed at the snakes in my enclosure, and he said that you shouldn't have Samophis in there because they're going to eat the other snakes. And I said to him, what is Samophis? And he said, the sand snakes. And I said to him, why are you calling them Samophis? And he said, well, that's their scientific name. And I said, well, what the hell is a scientific name?
Wow.
And he started explaining this to me. I was 16, 17 years old. I had no idea, never heard of it. So it was a slow start.
I don't wish to be rude, but I'm guessing we're of a similar age. And we are pre-internet people. So
yeah.
So
I have no idea what your age is there, Nipper, but I've just I'm heading for 65 this year.
You're a little bit older than me. I'm 53. I'm 53, but I'm still pre-internet. And
yes,
you're exactly right. I mean, these days, everyone can literally just look at their smartphone and find out within seconds any information they want over any species they see in the wild or any species they keep.
Absolutely.
But for someone like yourself, back in the day, I mean, there probably wasn't even a great deal of reference work easily available. You probably had to rent it, pre-order it from a library to find a book on South African snakes at the time.
So at the time, it was basically the big 1962 Fitzsimmons snakes of Southern Africa, which was a bit of a doorstopper and very expensive. I mean, there's no ways that we could afford a book like that. And then there were one or two little books by the late John Fisser. What snake is that? But there was very little. If you went to a bookstore, you wouldn't find a snake book on the shelves.
I can imagine. And also, were you keeping Venomous at that time, or were you just?
Yes.
You were keeping Venomous.
Yeah. I was keeping black mambas, green mambas, vine snakes, boomslang, Cape Cobra, rinkels, puff adders. And we didn't really have equipment, So initially,
that was my next question, because it's like a big industry now. I mean,
right.
You can literally click on Amazon, and you can get hex armor gloves. You can get snake hooks in any length you want. You can any bit of kit you need, visors, anything. But back then, you'd have had to be making your own kit.
Well, but there was nothing available. Snake tongs were unheard of. Snake hooks, you took an old golf club and you modified it. And so our initial black mamba catches, this was with a formidable herpetologist or field worker by the name of Gordon Sitaro. The Sitaro's dwarf chameleon, Bradypodian sitaro, is named after him.
Wow.
So Gordon and myself would go out to a very good spot for mambas, which was about a half an hour's drive from where we lived. And the strategy was that you would walk along the bush very, very slowly, very quietly, and you'd see a mamba basking on a shrub, often after a good meal, and you'd approach it as slowly as you can. And the moment the snake started moving, you had to dash and get it by the tail. And then once you grab it by the tail, it spins around to bite, obviously. So you literally pull it off balance, get it that side, the head comes around to bite you, it goes that way, and you do this until you tire it out. And then we would literally let the snake get its head into a shrub, and it would hook its head around a branch, and then you'd grab it behind the head.
Wow.
It's insane.
That is insane. Given today's safety protocols, that is really insane.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Crazy days.
And I presume there wasn't a lot of anti-venom available at that time.
Oh, we had no idea. It wasn't even an issue. In fact, what Fitzsimmons Snake Park did do at the time was they sold a kit that contained 2 vials of polyvalent antivenom, which we now know is an absolute waste of time. If you have a bad black mamba bite and they have 2 vials of antivenom, you're better off having an ice cream. Because they just do nothing.
Wow. That's incredible.
Different
Absolutely
times.
Incredible. I think I was reading there was until I can't remember. I want to say it was like 1990, maybe it was 1989, until they had perfected some kind of monovalent property to black mamba antivenin. It was 100% fatal.
Yeah, it's a bit of a fallacy, and part of the reason for that is that you've got to look at the sample size.
Okay.
So I've when we talk about allergic reactions to antivenom,
right,
we say that it's about 30 to 40% of patients that have an allergic reaction to antivenom, and about a quarter of those might go into anaphylaxis. But we had one instance where we had 7 children bitten by snakes and received antivenom, and all 7 of them had anaphylaxis. So that sample size was 100%. Nowadays, we see a lot of black mamba victims surviving. And in fact, the one study that was done in Zululand over a 5-year period, they had 879 snake bites documented.
Wow.
And 5 of them were black mamba bites, and all 5 survived. There wasn't a single fatality. And these are rural people that still have to get to a hospital.
Wow. That's incredible. Now, is there any, I mean, I don't think there's a way to tell if it was, I've never heard of any mamba giving a dry bite, but do you feel like
we
it
see
was,
a few of those.
Okay. I was going to say, did you feel like it's a residual amount of venom on the fang, just enough to give some kind of symptom, but not necessarily enough to be fatal? Yeah,
we see every now and then we'll see a black mamba bite with virtually no symptoms.
Wow.
That's not unheard of.
Incredible.
So just to take you back, so you're now 15, 16, 17, you're out in the bush catching mambas. Where did we go from there?
So when I finished high school, I went to school a bit early, so I got out of school too young to drive a motor car. And in those days, we had to do 2 years military training, compulsory. So I joined the South African police, and I ended up very soon after training, I ended up in the Narcotics Bureau in Durban. So we were dealing with drugs, etc. I was there for 2 years, and from there I went to the Durban City Police, which was a far slicker outfit, a lot more fun, and it was more playing cowboys and crooks than the previous job, because we would be there when there's action, and once we arrest the guys, we just gave them to the South African police, and they had to find cells and take fingerprints, and we were back on the road having fun. Roughly at the same time, so I was, let me just get this right, 19, 20 years old, the Fitzsimmons Snake Park was purchased by a Fritz Muller, and we got to know him well. We'd hang around there, and I sort of decided that I really wanted to do a Bachelor of Science degree. And I went and asked him if he had worked me for the few months till the end of the year when the new university intake happens. And I got a job there, and I was there for about 6 months. And before I could get to university, I was offered a job by Rod Patterson of Transvaal Snake Park. Now, at the time, Transvaal Snake Park, and I've traveled the world and looked at snake parks. At the time, Transvaal Snake Park was one of the finest snake parks in the world. It was a mind blow. It was they've just built a new section which they call the Terraquarium, 43 exhibits, beautifully done. It was incredible. You'd see a massive large enclosure with the rockery and a dozen Western diamondback rattlesnakes crawling around, and you'd go around a corner and then be a double volume enclosure with water at the bottom, with snake neck terrapins and water dragons diving in, and the next enclosure would be black mambas, and then Gila monsters in the next one, and it just went on forever. And in fact, when I started there, I didn't recognize 95% of the reptiles because I'd never seen them in my life. You know, we had marta terrapins, we had taipans, red-bellied black snakes, king cobra. It was just incredible. So I joined Transvaal Snake Park, and it was really a massive learning curve for me. And I never got to university. I was there for 3 years, learned a great deal. Rod Patterson was an excellent tutor. I started serious photography, writing for magazines, and I left there after 3 years, and then I wrote my first book, Snake versus Man, in my early 20s. And that book came out in 1984.
I know what Nipper and I are doing the minute this podcast is over.
Oh, you know it. We're going for that book. I'm already looking on it on Amazon.
100%. I'm going to hunt it down.
And then quite a few things happened. You know, I sort of learned what I could at the snake park. I got bored. And then I went back to Durban. I read the book. I tried a few things. They didn't really work out well. And then a bit of a checkered career. I started a newspaper just south of Johannesburg. And to this day, the newspaper is still going exceptionally well. I'm no longer an owner of it, but I started a newspaper. And a year after I started the newspaper, I had a phone call from some Israelis who I'd met at a World Crocodile Conference back in my snake park days. And they asked if I would help set up a commercial crocodile farm at Sun City and run that. And well, heck, that sounds wonderful. So off I went, and I helped them build a crocodile farm, and we started farming crocodiles commercially. We had 274 adult crocodiles, a massive facility. We were producing thousands of eggs in the first year. And it was an interesting time because back in 1985, we had about 40 crocodile farms in South Africa. And there's a lot of smoke. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors. You know, a lot of guys think you can make a root of money out of crocodile skins and all that sort of jazz. It's not that easy. And one thing that we noticed very quickly was that most of the crocodile farms were losing over 90% of their hatchlings in the first year.
Wow.
So there was massive fatality, and no one really knew why. And I got involved with a Professor Harry Smith at the University of Pretoria, and he was an animal nutritionist. And we started playing around with different diets. So we had various statistical groups, and we give the one group red meat only, the other one red meat and chicken. We tried a bit of starch, we tried a bit of marine fish, we tried whatever we could. And within a year, we solved the problem. A year later, we had a 98% survival rate of hatchlings.
Wow. Now, were these all Nilotus?
I farmed crocodiles for about 8 years. I was involved in that industry for about 8 years.
Very, very cool.
Good times, very interesting. Got very involved with the Crocodile Specialist Group, traveled the world presenting papers all over the USA, Thailand, Zimbabwe. I wrote about, with Professor Smith, I think we wrote about 42 papers on crocodile nutrition and incubating eggs and hatchability and fertility. We also produced a book called The Conservation and the Utilization of the Nile Crocodile in Southern Africa.
Wow.
That's cool. Going back to the diet,
yeah,
I'm really interested because, I mean, both Phil and I keep a lot of stuff. I mean, back in the day, there wasn't such an interest in proper diet. It was convenient diet for animals rather than what's best for the animal, I would imagine.
Yes.
Did you give a lot of, for the actual hatchlings, were you giving it insect prey as well or anything?
To the baby crocodiles?
To baby crocodiles.
No, we didn't have a good source of that. You know, one of the problems you have with commercial crocodile farming throughout the world is you need a lot of food and you need it readily available and you want it as cheaply as possible. So what most of the farmers were doing is they were relying on mortality chicken animals from chicken farms. But that was part of the problem because these chickens were dying from gram-negative diseases like salmonella, and reptiles are susceptible to that.
Yeah.
So you're feeding your hatchling crocodiles contaminated meat, And the moment your stress levels are a little bit higher, so they just lose condition and they get sick. And you're keeping, maybe several hundred crocodiles in one enclosure. They're all heated, and when you have a disease outbreak, everybody gets it.
Yeah. Incredible.
So where did we go from crocodile farming?
So I did that for 8 years, and I wrote, during that time, I wrote my first version of the complete guide to snakes of Southern Africa. I met, so I had a very good relationship with my publisher, and while still crocodile farming, my publisher, Basil van Rooyen, came to visit me, and he offered me a position of marketing director of book publishing house, Southern Books. And I'd often spoke at their sales conferences, and I had some pretty entrepreneurial ideas about business, and I thought it might be a good idea. So I joined Southern Books as a marketing director, and it was a bit of a disaster because I had to arrive at work with a pinstripe suit every day, wearing a tie, sit in board meetings. I always said that you take minutes and you waste hours, and it didn't work out very well. So after about 18 months, they actually got rid of me, got a 2-month salary and a handshake, and off I went. And it was quite scary because I had no idea what to try next. But in my time at the publishing house, I met an Indian couple who traded in excess books, remainder books. So all of our books that we supplied to bookstores that came back slightly damaged, they would buy very cheap and sell them at flea markets. And they suggested that we start a bookstore together. So I had no money. I had no other way of earning a living. And so we started this tiny little bookstore in a very popular mall called Eastgate. And I called the bookstore Fascination. And the fascination came from a book about snakes. So there was a book that was probably done in the 80s or so, or maybe even a bit earlier, where someone photographed a bunch of snakes, and they made a regular sized book just full of pretty photographs, and they called it Fascination. So that's where the bookstore's name came from. And so I was in this partnership. I was behind the cash register selling books 7 days a week. And after 6 months, I wasn't that keen on this whole retail thing. But and I suggested to my partners that they can take over the business. And they said, no, you take it over. And they put quite a bit of money in, but they very kindly let me pay them back the money they put in without interest. So they said, even if it takes me, I can give them $10 a month for the rest of my life, type of thing.
Wow.
So I took over the bookstore, and things started working out very well, and I put a lot of effort in. And I opened a second store and a third and a fourth. And 8 years later, I had 50 plus bookstores.
Wow.
And I was traveling. I was doing the London Book Fair and the American Book Fair and buying bulk stock. And then I started scratching around in New York. And I started a lingerie shop. And then I started a ladies' accessory shop. And then I started some gift stores where I was selling pretty much anything that's worthless and collects dust. That went into the gift stores. They were alternative gift stores. They were called the Barking Gecko. And we sold the pewter dragons, the myth and magic dragons. We sold dream catchers and rain sticks and whatever.
That's fantastic.
And I was in retail for about 15 years. In the meantime, I wrote the current version of the Complete Guide to Snakes. I also wrote Snakes and Snakebites while I was busy with the bookstores. And it grew into monstrosity. I had about 500 employees, 28 people at head office. We were turning over about $15 million a year. And then in 2008, with the economic crunch, it closed down. I lost everything. Yeah, wow. We had a few tough months. And what also happened at the same time is we had power outages in South Africa. That's when it all started. So people would be in the mall and all the lights go off and they go home. And you don't have sales. So once the retail was history, I started the African Snakebite Institute.
That's awesome.
And that's a whole different story.
That is a whole different story. And
Yeah.
that's why we've got you here today.
Yeah, that's the next. That's the next chapter. So if I can just do a quick recap. So you're a curious youngster who's playing with the wonders of the sub-Saharan African bush, and then you start keeping legitimately, and then you finish school, go to the reptile park, do some time there. Oh, there was police work in there as well. Might forgive me.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a
Shooting,
ride,
bit of
man.
arrests.
Yeah, that's a hell of a ride.
It was fun.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. And still, writing books in between. Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
I mean, writing the book for Southern Africa. I mean,
Legit.
it is the benchmark book for Southern African field herping. It is, it is, as I said to you earlier on, the layout has been copied by so many subsequent field guides. The photography in it is excellent. It's just an all-round fabulous. I read it often. I've never herped South Africa, but I still go back to that book and read through it because it's just such a brilliant book to read. It's fantastic.
And one of the fascinating things about the book is there isn't a single digital photograph in it. They're all from slides.
Really?
Really?
Yep.
Now that, I mean, again, Phil's a youngster, but I'm quite old, and having done both, I'd love my digital photography now, but having had to do film, people of new generations do not understand the difference. If I look through an old field guide, or even a coffee table book, and you'll see a picture of an emerald tree boa from 1950 or whatever. The work that has gone into getting that picture is so much more than just somebody that can snap 400 images, check that he's got the lighting right, check the ISOs right, everything. That's fine. If you're shooting, I mean, the score, but for the younger people, you're up to your neck in water or whatever, taking your picture. You've probably got 36 images to expose if you're lucky.
Yes.
And you don't know if you've got a decent image until weeks later.
Correct.
That's the thing.
Correct.
You can't check your light parameters. You can't check anything. It's just...
And there's no photo. There was no Photoshop. You couldn't go and correct those problems later.
You can't correct anything. It's just, and when you see these older field guides, I mean, even the Cogger books from Australia.
Yes. Yeah.
It's phenomenal that people took such great pictures. And to be fair, the cameras, although the lenses were high quality then, if you're looking at the accessories like the flashes, there was no slave flashes or anything like that. There's very basic light diffusers.
We would I'd make my own brackets with two little flashes, and then I'd stick it in a tripod, and then photograph, let's say, a frog, and then I'd measure the distance from the flash to the frog, write down my f-stop, go a half a stop over, half a stop under. You get your results 4 days later. You go back to your notes, and everything's washed out. And the next time you go a bit further away, and it was a nightmare.
I have just such admiration for anybody that had to take field herping pictures like that. I mean, even now when I go field herping, if there's a species, I will take hundreds of pictures and probably keep 5.
Yeah.
And you just didn't, and I've had species that I've searched for days and only found one of that particular species. Or I've done 3 trips and never found that species, and then seen one which you have to get pictures of. It's not like you can just pop back the next day. It's incredible how people achieved the results they did back then.
So one of the things that we're busy with, my colleague Luke Kemp and myself, is I've just switched to mirrorless, and I've decided we're busy with a book on the reptiles and amphibians of Southern Africa, which will be about 850 species. Wow. But I've decided that I'm going to re-photograph every reptile and amphibian in Southern Africa. So I'm starting from scratch.
That is amazing.
Absolutely awesome.
What a mission goal. I have the book here. I'm just flicking through now, looking at the pictures. I just think that's amazing.
And what's crazy
Absolutely.
is, Nipper can contest to it because Nipper has copious amounts of field work, infinitely more than I do. But just to know that you've photographed all of South Africa's reptiles and amphibians, and now you're going to go and do it all over again, like that is incredible.
That is amazing. I'm just looking at page 116, the coral snake. That is a fabulous picture. And to think that was not a digital picture is. I'm just going to give up. I'm going to hang my camera up. I'm going to stop, I think.
Yeah. And I love the comparison photos too. Is that not only do you have, like a bush snake and angusticeps in the same, comparison left and right, but you have them in the same pose, in the same type of foliage, in the same type of lighting, and it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. You were like you had goals in mind and you executed them flawlessly on animals that
pretty much
are fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. For those listening to this, Nipper and I told each other we weren't going to fangirl too hard over this one, but sometimes you just gotta let it happen. Oh man.
Yeah. Superb.
So after the bookstores and everything else, the retail establishments, you started the African Snakebite Institute.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Well, it started off. We have a system in South Africa called the CETAs, and what the government did is they decided that a lot of people with no qualifications need to be trained up at a very low level so that they can find themselves employment. So what they levied a small tax on people's salaries, which brought in hundreds of millions of dollars. And the idea was that if you had a CETA course that you presented, the government would, the people that did the course wouldn't have to pay. The government would pay you. And a very good friend of mine, Donald Stradholm, who had a snake park, approached me and he said, look, he's been doing some training, but there's this opportunity. If we can get a CETA registration, we can train thousands of people and we'll make good money. And so that's how the whole thing started. At the time, there were 2 or 3 people doing snake training, but not very sophisticated. So it was not a very well-developed market at all. And at the time, you could barely buy any equipment in this country. No one stocked tongs. No one had hooks. So you just couldn't get anything.
Can I just ask, just for people that are probably not as sad as me and read snake books all day, can you give us a rough idea of the number of venomous species that we're talking about, significant venomous species in South Africa?
Okay, so we usually deal with Southern Africa.
Yeah.
We have roughly 176 species of snakes. About 75 of them have no venom whatsoever. Lots of mildly venomous ones. Then we have 29 species that we don't have antivenom for that could put you in hospital. Snakes like the rhombic night adder, Biberin stiletto snake, berg adders. So these snakes are snakes that haven't caused fatalities, but they could make life very difficult for you. And then if we include the different subspecies, we have about 20 deadly snakes. So those are in essence the mambas and the cobras, the rinkels, although we haven't had a fatality in over 40 years, the boomslang, the vine snake, the gaboon adder, and the puff adder. So those are the deadly, the so-called potentially deadly snakes. So we're looking at about 20 species. So generally we'd say that about 11% of our snake species around there are considered potentially deadly. For the vine snake in South Africa, we haven't had any fatalities, but there have been 2 or 3 fatalities further north. And we don't have antivenom for it.
Is that because no one's been bit, or because?
No, we get the odd bite, but I think there are two major aspects. First of all, the subspecies Theratornis capensis oetzi gets up to about 1,7 meters, whereas our one very rarely exceeds about 1,2 meters. So it's a smaller snake with a smaller venom yield. But I think that the other big issue is the fact that they have Duvenoids glands, and that it's they need to chew a bit to get a lot of venom in. And
Right.
the few bites that we see, I doubt whether the fangs even penetrate in those bites. So if you look at the fang position in the boomslang, it's roughly under the eye. If you look at the fang position in Thelatornis, it's right back in the mouth, nearly right at the end. So they really have to open their mouth very, very wide to get a good bite. So I think it's a combination of those.
And how many roughly snake bites are we seeing a year in South Africa?
Okay, so South Africa, I don't have data for Southern Africa because we don't know what goes on in Mozambique and Zimbabwe, and etc. So my estimation is that we have about 4,000 bites a year, of which about 800 people are hospitalized, and we have about 10 to 12 fatal bites.
Wow.
What we don't quantify properly, and I think this is really important, is that we rarely look at morbidity. So a lot of these people, like spitting cobra, Mozambique spitting cobra bites and puffer bites, people don't easily die. But there's a lot of morbidity. A lot of these people have to go for a half a dozen operations afterwards, skin grafts. People are disfigured. You sometimes have loss of limbs, not that often, but that happens as well. So morbidity is it's a big issue, because if you have a rural farmer with a family of 12 people living in the bush, and they are living off the land, and he gets bitten by a puffer and loses a hand, you have 12 people who can't survive.
Yeah.
So it really is a big issue.
Yeah, it's that vicious cycle that, we always speak about in terms of, people getting bad information, and then people resenting medical treatment because of stories they heard from other, family members or,
Yes.
or other neighbors and stuff, and it goes round robin.
We had a case about 5 days ago. A young man was, I think they live in a farm. He was bitten on the foot, and the aunt got a hold of me. She said that this young man was bitten on the foot. He has a wife with a few young kids. Puffer bite. They sent me photographs. It was quite badly swollen, and I said to them, "You need to get that guy to hospital." Because what we find with puffer bites, you can even give anti-venom a day or two later. We still see pretty good results. With Mozambique spitting cobras, on the other hand, if you don't give a lot of anti-venom within 4 or 5 hours, it's a waste of time.
Wow.
So they were updating me the next day. No, he's still not. He went to the doctor. He got some cortisone and some pain tablets. And I said, well, that's not going to help. It's a puffer bite. And the next day, he was in severe pain. He subsequently, I think 2 or 3 days after the bite, ended up in hospital. And he's had major surgery. He's had, I doubt if he's going to even save the foot.
Wow.
So that is problematic.
So, as Phil said, are you seeing a big reliance on local medicines, or is there an ethos that they will go to hospital and they see that as an immediate thing, or will they rely on maybe traditional methods first, and if that doesn't work, then they'll go to hospital?
No, but it's not as bad as North Africa.
Right.
In the Sahel district, with all those ekas there, we see about 20,000 fatalities a year.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Because they are relying on traditional remedies. In South Africa, it's problematic in the rural areas. They still often rely on traditional healers, but we do have a very good system of clinics throughout South Africa. So it's quite easy for them to get to a clinic. And then in the high-risk areas, we'll have like a major hospital that will service 20 other smaller hospitals and clinics. So the treatment is not that bad. We tend to get them to those clinics. Some of the other challenges that we face is that the areas that don't see a lot of snake bites don't have experienced snakebite doctors. And that's where African Snakebite Institute has come in a big way, because I will often in an evening get 2 or 3 phone calls from doctors asking for advice. So we provide that service. The next issue, of course, is anti-venom. And very often, the rural hospitals that are in low-risk areas won't stock anti-venom because it's very expensive. And even in the high-risk areas, they often run out of anti-venom. So even in like central Johannesburg, I will sometimes get a phone call 8 o'clock on a Friday night where the main hospital has run out of antivenom. And the manufacturers, they say they're a pharmaceutical company. So they work from 8 to 5, Mondays to Fridays. They don't help you on weekends.
Yeah.
And this has prompted us to start the African Snakebite Institute Foundation, which Phil has already mentioned. And one of our missions with the foundation is we want to set up 25 antivenom banks where ample antivenom is available 24/7. So we're going to start throughout the country, from Messina in the north down to Cape Town, to Johannesburg, Kimberley, Uppington, all over the place. And we want to start off, we're getting various universities involved with their pharmaceutical divisions. We're getting hospitals involved. And at the moment, we're busy. We need to raise about $100,000 to stock all of these antivenom banks. So we're busy with that. And I think it'll take us a year or so and we'll achieve it.
Now, through the ASF, are you guys almost exclusively using the stuff from SAVP, or are you going to branch out and use like some of the InnoSerp and something like that?
Well, that's becoming very, very interesting because I'm also very involved with the World Health Organization. And there's a few massive initiatives. The one is to reduce snakebite fatalities by 50% within the next 5 years or so. And we just received a document yesterday where they're looking at Pan-African antivenoms that have better efficiency. So at this stage, we're only using South African vaccine producers. It's an excellent product, but it does have side effects. The price, we're paying about $120 a vial, $130 a vial, which compared with American antivenom is inexpensive.
Yeah.
But the problem is that for most serious bites, if you're looking at a black mamba bite or a spitting cobra bite, you need 12 to 15 vials to start off with if you want to treat it well.
Right.
And what is the average income in those areas?
Close to zero.
Close to zero.
So our state hospitals provide them with free antivenom.
Right, okay.
So if they go to a state hospital, there's no major costs involved. If you're talking a private hospital, an average snake bite in South Africa to treat costs about $10,000 for one snake bite.
Interesting. And what's funny is if I have all of my proper documentation, and forgive me if my conversion's wrong, but if I have all my proper documentation in the US and I acquire some of the SAVP stuff, right? SAMR, however you want to pronounce it. You guys are selling it for like what, 180 Rand, maybe, or 120 Rand?
No. It's 1,910 Rand per vial.
Okay, which comes
so
out
it's about $130.
Okay,
is our price.
That same vial for me in the States. If I went to a hospital and I didn't have my own, and one of the local venom banks gave it to me, it would be approximately $2,400 to $3,000 a vial. Dollars a vial.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's why there's a lot of smaller individuals like myself and some other guys that we're starting to go through all the paperwork process to acquire it legitimately, because the conversion from the hospital is astronomical. But that's a whole nother topic for another time. But excuse me, what I was going to say is SAVP, or South African vaccine producers, are they going to start working with more lyophilized stuff like InnoSerp is, or is it strictly going to be refrigerated liquid for now?
I don't think much is going to happen there in the foreseeable future. Snakebite is so minor an issue in South Africa, and SAVP is a parastatal. We can even, if one can take the current antivenom and put it through one more process of purification, we can virtually eliminate anaphylaxis.
Wow.
But no one's interested, because the moment we tamper, so our antivenoms are registered with our Medicines Control Council. The moment you tamper with the recipe, you have to then go back to clinical trials. And you've got to retest the new product. And then you're looking at a cost of about probably about $2 million to get that done.
Wow.
So that's not going to happen.
Yeah. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
So which species would you say is the most problematic in South Africa?
No, but that's a good question. So one of at the moment, what we're seeing mainly are Atractaspis bibroni bites, the Bibrin stiletto snake. And part of the reason is that a lot of people pick them up. They think they're harmless. And we have no anti-venom. There's no real treatment. You get a bite from one of those. We ask you to rest for 6 days. And after 6 days, the doctors have another look at it. And then they decide, do they start debribing? Has it got better? Do they start looking at amputation? We deal with sometimes 4, 5, 6 of those bites per day. Really is a big problem.
And that's seasonal as well, right?
It is seasonal. The moment the rain comes, they're on the surface. Wow. So right now they're moving, and we can road cruise certain areas in Limpopo for an hour or two, and we'll catch eight of them in an evening crossing the road. So they're abundant. The biggest problem, hands down, is the Mozambique spitting cobra. Widespread, locally abundant, voracious feeder. They eat anything. You can feed them whatever you want to. And what happens with these Mozambique spitting cobras is they very often end up in houses. So it's sort of accidental. They're on the hunt. They get to a wall. They turn left or right. They get to a sliding door that's open and they're in the house. Or they get to the front door and there's a gap under the front door big enough for them to squeeze in. And they get into the house and they hunt. They're looking for food. And they actually locate people asleep in their beds. Sometimes rural people asleep on the floor. Sometimes Americans that have come here and paying top dollar in the most expensive lodge. And they bite people. They bite people in the face. They bite people on the chest. And we've looked at this very, very carefully. And we have no doubt that it's a feeding response. Absolutely no question. So they're finding the mammal in the bed and they're biting. And we see 30, 40 kids, often babies, being bitten in the eye, bitten in the face. We've had cases where the one guy sleeps with his elbow hanging off the side of the bed. He got bitten on the elbow twice. We had another case where a guy was lying in his bed trying to fall asleep in a very expensive game lodge, and the next thing, boom, bite on the hand before the snake even got onto his bed. And what we find with the SAVP polyvalent antivenom is it covers 10 species, but it is least effective on Mozambique spitting cobras. So what you need to do with those bites is you need to give the patient 12 vials immediately within an hour or 2 or 3 or 4. 6 hours after the bite, you don't even have to bother to waste the antivenom because it just doesn't do anything. And one of the things that happens with these Mozambique spitting cobra bites is we see these skip lesions. So a bite on the hand, you'll see a patch, a purple patch here and another one here. As the lymphatics spread that venom, it starts popping out through the skin. And terrible bites. We see really, really severe tissue damage with them.
Wow.
Not a lot of fatalities, but a lot of morbidity.
And what's causing them to bite the random elbow or the random foot? I mean, it's not like
they just think it's something they can eat. They just smell a mammal. It's simple as that.
Wow. Incredible.
It's bizarre, but it's so 99% of bites in the face, or let me rephrase that. 99% of bites in South Africa where people are in their beds are Mozambique spitting cobras.
Wow.
It's crazy. And then in Namibia, we see exactly the same with the zebra cobra. The majority of people bitten in their beds in Namibia are bitten by zebra cobras.
Wow. Now, is this something that could be, in theory, prevented with like a mosquito net, or is
absolutely?
Yeah.
So we do recommend people to on farms and at lodges to put mosquito doors. Those doors are closed permanently with a mesh.
Yeah.
We suggest that people sleep under mosquito nets, but it's very, very difficult. It's to change people's culture now. Get them to sleep in a way different from what they've been doing for hundreds of years. It's not that easy.
Yeah. Incredible.
And is the spitting cobra, is that a common species?
Very, very common. Where it occurs, it's very common. I've caught up to 6 in the morning.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but they also have no problem living in heavily urbanized areas in terms of
correct
concrete. Absolutely. And because they're so opportunistic that
Yes.
They don't care. They're going to live under a trash can or, in a garage or wherever.
So next on the list then would be the puff adder. And there has been some phenomenal work done by Graham Alexander and his team at WITS on puff adder bites. And what they have found is that adult puff adders in camouflage mode, in other words, when they're hiding in the bush, don't bite. You can step on them, they don't bite. So during one study, we had a few students who accidentally stood on these snakes and weren't bitten.
Wow.
So they did an experiment, and I think they did about 40 experiments where they filled a gumboot with rocks and went and deliberately stood on puff adders in camouflage. And 40 out of 40, not a single one bit, not a single one puff. They did nothing.
Really?
They just froze, and they remained in their own mind invisible. So much so that some of them were killed by giraffes standing on them in the snow.
Wow.
So what we already know is that a high percentage of puff adder bites that we see are juveniles and sub-adults, because these young snakes aren't established yet and they're on the move. So they're moving far more than the well-established ones, and because they're more mobile, they get stood on.
Interesting. Very interesting. And that's specifically for Arietans and not any of the other dwarf bittis at all.
Yes. As far as we know, I would suspect that it's going to be similar for Bittis gabonica, because gabonica occurs in northern Zululand, and we never hear of bites from gabonica. Never. It's unheard of. It's totally unheard of, which is quite amazing.
Which is incredible because, I mean, I've never seen gabonica in the wild, but the ones I keep in captivity, if I reach in with hemostats to remove a piece of feces, it attacks the feces.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating to me. It makes me wonder if that's because they know they're in the wild or not.
But would that be gabonica or rhinoceros?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, both. The rhinoceros is way more quick to go. Way more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Black mambas. So this, a lot of people regard black mambas as these highly aggressive snakes, and all the myths that go with it. Black mamba bites are very few and far between, and quite often what happens is someone accidentally surprises the snake. So these snakes, one of the things that they love doing is basking in the sun. And it appears that they bask in the sun and fall asleep. So they're sitting there fast asleep, and the next thing you come walking past, and we had one case of a farmer who drove past on a motorbike, and as he put his leg down, the snake had a fright and bit him in the leg. We see this quite often, but they're very skittish. And if you give them half a chance, they're gone. If they have half a chance, they escape. To give you an idea, in the greater Durban area, the snake removers are removing over 100 black mambas a year from suburban gardens.
Wow.
And how many bites do we see? 0.
Oh, that's incredible. Incredible.
Yeah. Amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. And then is it also seasonal with their basking? Are they doing it more in the cooler months or no?
No. So if we look at our snake bite statistics, 80% plus of our bites happen in the warm summer months from November till April.
Okay.
That's when you see most of the bites. So they come out in the morning, they bask, and then they go into the shade.
Very interesting. Very cool. And I noticed too, just because I'm perpetually on the Southern African snake ID groups on Facebook and stuff, just because I have to see it all,
Yes.
I feel like there's so many quote unquote boom slang sightings that they just assume it's like a bright green male, and it's not, it's a bush snake or whatever. Is that also seasonal too? Is all these people seeing these lush green snakes basking?
Yeah, it's mainly in the hot summer months. they certainly slow down in winter, but where you have a lot of your harmless green snakes, the Philothamnus, it is a lot of that is coastal and that's subtropical. So you see quite a bit of movement in winter as well, but it does slow down.
So what about things like garter snakes? Are you seeing significant bites from them, or are they not? Not too much
We've
of a problem?
documented a few recently. There was a paper that I did with Luc Verberg on one of the garter snakes, but no, bites are very infrequent and invariably snake handlers or keepers. Garter snakes are not common. We come across a handful a year, and some of them, like the high-felt garter snake, Ep.3 nevadi media, I haven't seen one of those in about 10 years in the wild.
Really?
Yeah, so obviously a lot of these things we aren't targeting specifically.
Sure.
If we target a species, would have better results, but we're hoping in general, and we just don't see a lot of garter snakes.
Is it something to do like with the sunbeam snakes in Malaysia, where you having suburban development and the snakes get pushed out, or is it just
that is a general problem for all of our snakes? But no, it's not the issue with the garter snakes. They're just very secretive, and the majority of them that are caught crossing roads. But then some of them in some areas, like in KwaZulu-Natal, there's areas where you can flip rocks and come across quite a few of them.
That's so cool.
Awesome.
What about forest cobras? Are they significant, or?
So forest cobras, there's two interesting things about them. The one is that they just about never bite, and the main reason for that is that, first of all, they're in very dense vegetation, so it's very easy for them to escape once there's problems. But the other thing, and we use them in training, is that they bite the least in training. So a lot of snakes might occasionally strike out or try and bite, but the forest cobras are very chilled. The other thing about the forest cobras, and ours is now obviously subfulva, it's no longer Minnelika,
right, is
we see a lot of cytotoxins in their venom. So in recent bites, we had one case where a woman had 2 bites, one on each hand, and she was on a ventilator briefly, but I think there were some drugs involved as well. Generally speaking, with forest cobras, we see a fair amount of swelling, and and the bites aren't that bad, and we see some necrosis as well. Some guys lose the odd finger.
Very interesting. Both hands. I want to hear the rest of that story.
She was at a backpacker's lodge, and apparently she saw it crawling towards her, and then she tried to rescue everyone present. So she grabbed the snake, got bitten, grabbed her the other hand, got bitten, and so the story goes.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, the classic ego Good Samaritan.
Yes. But as I said, I think there was more to that story.
Yeah. And now sorry, Phil, we've got to ask, because Phil is just obsessed with them. What about ringcarls?
Oh, I'm not interested in those. I'm kidding. The ringcarls is actually a very interesting snake because throughout most of its range, it's a grassland species. So here in the Highveld where we are, we see them in grasslands, especially when there's a bit of water close by, because they're largely toad eaters. More often than not, they'll eat toads, but they'll take rodents. And what's interesting about them is that they very often have a permanent hole that they live in, and they will be very close to their hole. So the moment there's disturbance, they're straight down the hole and they're gone. And we find that a lot of dogs get bitten and killed because they corner the snakes, but people don't get bitten because they just don't get near the snake. And when we know of a snake on a small holding and you try and go and remove it, every time you get there, it's gone. It goes down its hole. So they really are difficult to catch. When you get down into the Western Cape, you start getting them in fynbos as well. It's a very different vegetation. But by and large, it's a grassland species. It's obviously being a spitting snake, they have a predominantly cytotoxic venom, and I don't think that I know of adults that have ever been placed on a ventilator with a bite. We do see a bit of tissue damage,
right?
But it's not that bad a bite. And as I said, we haven't had a fatality in over 40 years, and the last fatality I think was a 7-month-old child.
Wow. And that now, is that because of the use of antivenom, or is it
No,
because
no. We
it's
just
cytotoxic?
first of all, we don't see many bites.
Right.
I hear of maybe 2 or 3 Runkel's bites a year at most, and most of those don't even get anti-venom because the symptoms don't justify it.
Wow. Interesting.
What about the smaller, I'm going to call them cobras, but the asperdellaps, things like that? Are they causing problems or?
Not really. Again, they're nocturnal. They're very quick to escape if you give them half a chance. They're locally abundant. If you go into parts of the West Coast, we can, if we do some road cruising, we can find a dozen in one evening easily.
Wow.
But bites are very, very few and far between. But, if you look at some of the work that Brian Fry did, their venom is comparable with that of Cape Cobras, but they just don't have the volume.
Yeah.
It's a small snake. They have a very small venom yield, not to be messed with. In Namibia, we've just had another confirmed case of, I think, the 3rd or 4th confirmed fatality with the children that were bitten by Aspergillus lubricus calzi. So up there, it's a pretty bad bite. I don't think you should take chances with Aspergillus. They're pretty nasty. With the Scutatus, we very rarely see bites, and we've seen some bites with quite a bit of tissue damage as well in Scutatus, but not so much in lubricus.
And you're staying with Namibia. I mean, I appreciate they're very small, but what about some of the other sort of dwarf bitis? Are we getting many bites from them?
We are seeing some bites, and quite often they are snake handlers, but we are seeing legitimate bites as well. And there's no question that there's a fair amount of neurotoxins in their venom. And there's 1 or 2 documented cases of bitter xeropaga with children that were in a bit of trouble.
Wow.
With cornuta and cordalis, and that the same would be for rubida and the other small ones. There's a fair amount of pain and swelling and a bit of local tissue damage, but most of those bites aren't that bad.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Is there, I mean, going slightly off topic, is there much wild collecting of those snakes? Are they heavily protected, or is there a legal trade in them?
Yeah, that's quite a debate, Nipper. I'm very involved with the green scorpions. We're looking at the legal pet, the legal pet trade very, very carefully, and things have certainly slowed down. Having said that, we had 2 Germans arrested 3 days ago.
It's always Germans. It's always Germans.
So I think it's become more difficult for guys to hide snakes in luggage with international flights and to just send stuff with couriers because there's a lot more X-raying going around.
Yeah.
So yes, it is a problem, and we keep an eye on it, but I don't think that it's as enormous a problem as it was in the past. One of the things that have happened more recently is the new trick, of course, is to claim that everything is captive bred. And we had guys exporting sun gazers, Smog giganteus, and they were claiming that they were breeding like 60 babies a year. Just about no one in the world has bred more than 1 or 2 at a time. And the last big shipment was actually stopped, and they checked the DNA of the babies and of the parents, and none of them were related to the parents.
It's good to hear that. It's good to hear they're getting stopped.
We have some initiatives where we are suggesting that if one wants to captive breed reptiles, that you should have your breeding animals DNA'd, and if you can prove that the progeny come from those parents, do it. I think what would be great about that is you will pay a little bit more for very good animals, and it's going to stop a lot of the illegal trade.
100%. I think most decent keepers would rather have a locality-specific, decent captive-bred animal rather than some stressed wild-caught thing.
And I personally have animals.
Gaps. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say I personally have animals that came from multiple different countries that had paperwork to be captive bred, and they were not at all. Because when you look at enough of these animals, you can tell,
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the flaws we still have, we have 9 provinces in South Africa, each province with its own laws, and KwaZulu-Natal is still a little bit behind, except for a few snakes like green marmors and gaboon adders and the dwarf adders. There, you can pretty much keep anything and breed them and do what you want to, but they're also tightening up now. They're becoming more strict. And yeah, I think it's we need to get our act together. We need to get our everything legitimate. We've got a guy breeding presumably or allegedly breeding dwarf chameleons and exporting them. But a lot of the ones that he's supposedly breeding only occur in protected areas. So how do you get broodstock if they only occur in protected areas?
Yeah.
Another snake that we just need to mention is the berg adder, Vitis atropus.
Yes.
It's an interesting snake because we basically have 4 isolated populations. It might even be 5, but you have them in the Cape Fold Mountains, you have them in the KwaZulu-Natal Drakensberg, you have them in Mpumalanga Drakensberg, and then eastern Zimbabwe. And they have a pretty nasty venom that's somewhat cytotoxic, causes a bit of pain and swelling. Does affect people's vision. Some people have gone permanently blind.
Wow.
It affects your senses of taste and smell, but then it also affects breathing. And in a study of 14 cases over 20 years, every single victim, 5 to 7 hours after the bite, had to be ventilated because they stopped breathing.
Wow.
So how long does that last for?
Several hours or even several days.
Wow.
That's an interesting one. And again, we don't have anti-venom.
No.
We have one young child now, I think it's 3 years after a bite, he still has massively dilated pupils 3 years later.
Really?
And in Europe, that snake is fairly common with venomous keepers and not considered to be, particularly a dangerous specimen.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see some horrible bites, very scary. I had a case where a youngster was bitten. They were an hour and a half up the mountain from their vehicle. We got them. They walked down to the vehicle. They were driving to the hospital, and he was fine. 2 hours after the bite, nothing. And then he started vomiting, and 4 hours later, he was on a ventilator.
Wow. Absolutely incredible.
I think that's just crossed that off my wish list now.
Well, I was going to bring up another, since we're just going down the gauntlet of animals that Nipper and I want to keep. I have kept night adders frequently in the past. I don't have any currently, but I've noticed that there's been a lot of comparisons with egg eaters, and I never put seeing them in captivity. I never put comparison like, oh, they look alike. I always considered more egg eaters to be more of the Echis clone or the Echis copy, right?
Yeah,
but I see you post a lot of stuff about night adders recently as well.
Yeah, we post a lot of that. It's a little bit like the difference between an elephant and a rhino, I think. But some people do get, and the only thing that confuses them is that the egg eater may have some chevron markings on the neck region.
Right.
But if you look at the snakes, I mean, they're just so different. Egg eaters are nocturnal. They're long and thin. They have heavily keeled scales. They have vertical pupils. Night adders are more active in the day. They're toad eaters. They have a velvety skin. They shorter and fatter. They're very, very different snakes. I really don't know how people mistake them.
Yeah, I agree.
What about, I mean, I know it's considered mildly venomous, but have you had any reports of bites from beak snakes?
From the rufous beak snakes, there are one or two documented cases. It's near impossible to get bitten. You've got to stick your finger down their throat, I think. But first of all, they're not common. They're not common at all. They're very fast moving. And in recent years, I've photographed maybe 3 individuals. We don't see a lot of them in captivity. But there was one case where the victim had a fair amount of hemorrhaging and hematomas. So I wouldn't want to mess with them too much. There's even a well-documented case of the bird, a fancy peacock, who got bitten by our spotted harlequin snake, Marais lacteus, and it bit him. So he sort of thought this is a good time to get some nice photographs of a snake biting. So he was sort of kicking away, and the next day or so, his entire arm was just purple everywhere with the subcutaneous bleeding.
Oof.
And I think there's a very good lesson in that, and it's something that a lot of us slip up on. Don't, even with very mildly venomous snakes, like our grass snakes, the Simophis, the Samophylax, don't let them chew on you, the Telescopus. What we're seeing more and more reactions where not even herpetologists with multiple bites, but where they let them chew, maybe to take a photograph, and we're seeing quite interesting reactions. If you give that snake the time to chew, and again, they have the Duvenois glands, and they get more venom into you, you're going to have far more significant symptoms than just a minor bit of itching.
Excellent. I was hoping that you'd say that.
Well, we both keep Telescopus, and to my mind, it's one of South Africa's most beautiful-looking snakes. I mean,
100%.
Semi-annulatus is just
stunning.
It's an incredible thing. Yeah, 100%. 100%. So, what is your role going forward now with the institute? What is your 5-year plan for that? What's your drive now?
Well, we've got 50-year plans. So first of all, our main income comes from training and equipment, and we have by far the bulk of the African training market. We train over 6,000 people a year.
So, who is your target audience? Who are you training? Law enforcement?
It's largely in South Africa. It's largely corporates, and those corporates would be companies where they have snakes on site. It sort of falls under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So we train them in snake awareness, how to react. Every training facility that we visit will a day later they get a poster from Luke that the dangerous snakes of your site. We train them up in first aid. We look at the treatment, what protocols they have in place. And then on these sites, we're also training up a team of people in safe snake removal because they have environmental policies that can no longer kill snakes. And this removal is done with equipment, and we have adapted and changed equipment, and we've modified equipment, and we have incredibly good protocols. We really have the best in the market. So that we do for mines, construction companies, solar farms, wind farms, Department of Defense, the police, the various conservation organizations. But we also have clients in about 19 African countries. So we actually train from Egypt through Senegal, Guinea, Ghana, right down to Angola, Mozambique, all over the place.
Incredible.
So that's one very important part of our business. The other part is that we do public courses. And the public courses initially were like a little fun thing that we do now and then because people want to do snake removal. Well, it now turns out that our public courses are so popular that virtually every course is fully booked. And we will have 50 people on a course 3 out of 4 weekends of the month.
Wow.
And it's sort of the same sort of course, slightly adapted. And we teach them how to, again, use hooks and tongs. Now, a lot of people, mainly the keyboard warriors, have a lot to say about snake tongs. There are these horrible things, and you hurt snakes in that. Trust me, a snake tongue is infinitely better than a spade. There's no comparison. And
100%.
we teach people how to use the tongs properly. And that's the big difference, because a lot of people don't know how to use tongs. So we teach them how to use tongs in a very, very safe manner, where you don't hurt the snake, where we containerize them in a safe manner. And our protocols really are excellent. And if ever you guys can get to South Africa, I'd love to see you on one of our courses.
100%.
So, I'm packed already.
These courses work really well. But what will happen with these courses, so on our initial course, we don't allow any physical contact with the snake. So there's no tailing, no necking, no nothing. So we literally teach people with a Cape Cobra. You very gently pick it up at mid-body. You get it into a bucket or a tube, and it's easy. It's and some people will say to us that you can't use a single hook on a puff adder. You're going to hurt its backbone. We have puff adders that we've been using single hooks on for 10 years, and we X-ray them, and they're perfect.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with them, but it's the person that's using the tool and how that person uses it. That's what it's all about.
Technique.
The technique. So the next level, a lot of people will say to us, gosh, that was fun. How do I get more experience? So now I've introduced boot camp. And boot camp is a whole day of practical. So we start you off in the morning, and you use the tongs on a puff adder, in a bucket, in a tube, in a bucket, and then we'll get the tongs out, and you go in a bucket, in a tube, in a bucket. And then we go one level up where we start teaching you how to tail. And we will teach you exactly what snakes not to tail and what snakes you can tail. And the methods are very, very important. And I see this quite often with people tailing snakes. You do it wrong, you're going to get yourself bitten.
Yeah.
You're going to really know what you're doing. So we teach the right methods. And then what we do after the lunch is we then have scenarios where we hide snakes in old buildings, and you've got to choose your equipment, and you've got to go, and then you've got to go and get your snake out, and you've got to secure it.
Brilliant.
So those are the boot camps. They're really, really popular. And then our third level is we do advanced snake handling. And this is largely for people like yourselves who want to keep venomous, people who work at snake parks. And they all go through tubing, probing, necking. We teach them everything. We teach them how to neck mambas, because the only way to catch a black mamba is to neck it. And if I go out to catch a problem black mamba, my average capture takes about 22 seconds. Snakes
Really?
And it's done, none of this shouting and screaming as you see on television. It's a very simple procedure. We have an additional course. We do an advanced first aid for snakebite course. And there I use some of what I train in basic life support. So we look at bag valve masks, pocket masks, proper applications of pressure bandages, of the smart bandages. So that's pretty much what we do training-wise. But then on the equipment side, as you guys have seen, we have a massive range of equipment. We make our own equipment. We have about 15 different snake tongs in our range. We have 12 different snake gaiters, from cheap, effective, but very heavy ones to super lightweight gaiters that are made out of Kevlar. And most of these we manufacture it. We make it ourselves. So the equipment's a very big part of our business, and we are now starting to go wholesale in South Africa, where you'll be able to get our tongs and hooks and gaiters in camping stores, outdoor stores. So we're busy with that at the moment.
Incredible.
Fantastic. Going back to the first aid thing, it's something of an interest of mine. Emergency first aid for work as well. What bandages are you using? Because there is a debate about pressure bandages for snake bites.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Nipper, there's lots of debates. There's a lot of guys who use them effectively and who quite like them. A lot of people who don't think they work at all. So basically, I'm quite fortunate that I get to speak at snakebite symposiums in the USA. I go to Spain. I go to the Netherlands, Kenya, and most of these meetings, I share a stage with David Worrell, David Williams, Brian Fry, Wolfgang Wuster, and the likes. And we chat about these things all the time. And we look at the latest results, and we look at what works and what doesn't. And locally, we have Dr. Colin Tilbury, who's published extensively on snakebite. We have Dr. Muller, who's he's sort of snakebite protocol is the standard at the moment. So all of these guys are involved in our decisions. And when I write something about first aid and snakebite, I take all of their views into consideration. So having said all of that, we use the smart bandages from Australia, the ones with the rectangles printed on them that you stretch until they make the squares. And we only recommend them for black mamba and Cape Cobra bites, nothing else. If you're bitten by the other cobras, and you don't worry about. If we look at our snakebite deaths in South Africa, the 10 to 12 deaths that we see every year are Cape Cobra and black mamba bites. And the reason for that is that people stop breathing. So you want to get to a hospital as quickly as possible. You want to delay symptoms if you can with a pressure bandage. And you want to get that patient intubated and ventilated as soon as you can. So we teach for those bites to use pressure bandages. And we also teach, as I mentioned, the use of pocket masks and the use of bag valve masks. But what you have to bear in mind with first aid is you've got to consider your audience. If I'm teaching one of you guys first aid that's keeping venomous, it's going to be very different from a school teacher who takes kids on camps.
Yeah.
And he's done a first aid level 1 course where they teach you how to put one plaster on. I can't teach that guy how to use a bag valve mask in half an hour.
Yeah.
It's too complex. So all of these things come into play, and you have to consider all of these different things. But yes, we do recommend the Australian smart bandages for neurotoxic bites.
That's grand. So when you're out field herping, when you're not super busy teaching everybody else, if you get a minute to yourself and you're out first field herping, what do you pack in your kit?
Herp wise or first aid wise or what?
Everything. First aid wise,
Okay.
what are you packing?
So when we do our courses, we obviously take BVMs, we take pressure bandages, we take adrenaline with us. We have our own anti-venom on standby. Never been necessary, but we get for that. Field herping wise, I've spent the last 15 years with Aaron Bauer from Villanova. We've done Namibia north, west, south, east. We've done every mountain range, every riverbed. We can pretty much tell you exactly where every single reptile is in Namibia and where every single reptile is not.
That's fantastic.
That is amazing.
We've done southern and western Angola. I've done quite a bit of work up in Mozambique. A lot of the trips with Aaron, the late Bill Branch, was always with us when he could. But most of my work has been with Aaron. And in the field, I take a stump ripper, and that's about it. A few bags to bag stuff, a few containers, and the rest is in the vehicle. But I just go with the stump ripper.
Yeah. Because, I doubt there's anything that you've ever experienced that you couldn't just use the stump ripper to bring it back to the truck or to
Absolutely.
and get whatever other tools or accoutrement you may need.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable grabbing big mamas with a stump ripper in my hand. That's no problem.
That's cool. And just while we're on field herping, I know you have seen all the species in South Africa. Is that correct?
No, I've seen most of them, not all of them.
You've seen most of them.
There are some mysteries. And taxonomically, at the moment, it's an absolute nightmare with these darn phylogenists and all their DNA nonsense. They're driving us insane.
I was so close to finishing Europe, so close. And now I've got 6 species to see.
Well, as I tell people, you did finish Europe and then you got shafted.
Well, I've still got I've still got 1 snake to see, tenuous if it's in Europe or not, or whether you count that island as Europe. But they on DNA they've split the most boring brown little gecko you've ever seen into 4 separate species now. Yeah. So now I've got to go back to places and just try and find this gecko that looks exactly like the other gecko I've already seen, but it just lives on a different island. So I feel your pain.
The time has come that we very seriously have to rethink the definition of a species, which one of the 20 odd we're going to use. And I firmly believe that we must put far more emphasis again on morphology and on behavior. You can't describe a species if you've never seen what it does. And then we can worry about the DNA. And I have no doubt that 10 years from now, we're going to look back and we're going to say, I can't believe we used those primitive genes back in 2021.
Yeah.
Because it's all going to be a load of rubbish by then. We'll have far better genes to work with, and they'll chuck a lot of that out.
100%. And I do think there's a lot of people splitting species just to pass their PhD and
100%.
Get their name in a paper and that sort of thing. And it's just a real pain.
We have a gecko in Ochrabes called the Ochrabes gecko. It used to be, it's a Pachydatus atorquatus. It's a little rock-living gecko that runs around on the edges of rocks. It's got these short legs, it's got the lamellae, and it does its thing on the rocks, and we know its behavior very well. In the same area, we have It used to be Pachydaculus goody, which is a completely different animal. It's a long-legged animal that doesn't run around on rocks, and it comes out of these avalanches of rocks at night walking on its long legs. And they've just synonymized them because the DNA is the same. They're completely different animals in appearance and behavior in every which way, except DNA.
Ridiculous.
Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So
the other thing, guys, that I wanted to mention, getting back to the African Snakebite Institute Foundation. So part of the one big initiative is that we're trying to get these anti-venom banks going. The other thing that we're doing is we provide free training to medical doctors. So we go around the country and we get doctors at a hospital together or at various conferences, and I lecture them on the use of anti-venom and on venomous snakes, and that we provide absolutely free. We charge them no fee whatsoever. Another initiative that we're busy with my dear friend Paul Muller down in Gainesville in Florida, and we've got Dr. Ab Abercrombie also involved in this initiative, is we're busy trying to buy a farm in Namaqualand, which we're going to gear up for masters and PhD students to come and do their field studies on reptiles at very, very affordable rates, like just about for nothing. So we're busy with the legalities and the tax implications, but at this rate, I think by next year we'll have a research farm going in Namaqualand, and it'll be open for anyone anywhere in the world.
Incredible.
fantastic.
Absolutely incredible.
We will put links in the bio so that I presume that there is a funding part to this.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Phil and I will ensure that that's in the bio so that if anybody's listening to this and they want to contribute, that they can.
In case Phil has a few spare $1 million or something. And it is a registered NPO. So 0 of the money goes to any other expense or salaries. Everything goes straight into the work we're doing.
That's fantastic.
Phil, we spoke about books while we were waiting for Nipper to finish that cup of tea earlier. So I've just done a major revision of the Complete Guide to Snakes. It'll be out September next year. It's going to be great. It's a virtually total rewrite with new photographs, distribution maps, and a lot of information. Luke and I are working on the reptiles and amphibians of Southern Africa, about 850 species. That'll be out the following May. And then Luke and myself have just signed a contract to do a massive revision of the classic 1962 Fitzsimmons snakes.
Wow.
And we're really, really excited about it. And our publisher has said to us, guys, there's no expenses spared here. You do what you want to do. And if it's too big for a single volume, we'll make it a double volume.
That's awesome.
It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah. Absolutely. Monumental. Awesome.
More room I need to find, and I have to buy another bookcase, I think.
I know. Literally. I just was organizing. You said you were organizing stuff before you came on, Nipper. I'm at max on two full bookshelves. And the problem is, I think these damn bookshelf manufacturers in Sweden or wherever the hell they are, they know that we need more of them. So they make them smaller. So we have to keep buying more.
100%.
That's what it is. Now,
100%.
Speaking on the terms of both the African Snakebite Institute and the African Snakebite Foundation and books on the shelf, the ASI also has an amazing mobile app that
the app.
We have to touch on the app. I mean, I'm virtually 8,000 miles away from you, and I'm on the app every day.
So the app was really interesting. We have a very dear friend who's now sort of become part of the ASI, and he's an IT geek. His late father said to me once that he said, "I never thought my son is going to become a typist." And Venom is he's a wizard. So Venom runs our website. He runs our social media. On Snakes of Southern Africa, we now close to 250,000 people on that page. The ASI page, we're close to 250,000 people. We now have 750,000 people on our social media, and the app has had 167,000 downloads. It's one of the top 10 reference apps in Africa.
Wow!
And all thanks to Willem, and he's done phenomenal stuff. So we've got snake, spider, and scorpion profiles. You're not sure what a puffer looks like. You caught up the profile. You've got 4 color photographs, distribution map, and some information. We've got 800 snake removers that if you, in any town in South Africa, you press on snake removal if you have a snake in your garden, and the nearest guy's name pops up, and then the app will tell you how far he is away from you. So you just phone him, and he comes along and he removes it for you. We've got local snakes. We've taken all the snake records for South Africa over the last 200 years, probably about 30,000 records, and we've digitized them in quarter-degree grid squares. So we have a feature called local snakes. So if you're in Kokstad and you press on local snakes, it'll list only the snakes in that area within about a 80-kilometer radius. So there we go. We have first aid on it. We have the medical treatment of snakebite. We have a feature that Luke runs called snake. I think it's request an ID. So no matter what you see, you photograph it with your app. It gets emailed to Luke. He can see where you sent it from, and he will ID it and email you back. And on a busy day, he'll have over 200-300 photographs in a single day.
Wow.
That he has to ID.
That's awesome.
Oh, fantastic.
So the app is working incredibly well. We have over 2,000 medical doctors on the app, and they phone us in the early hours of the morning. We've got a snakebite victim. They've killed the snake, or they've photographed it. Can you help us? Can you tell us what it is? Can you tell us what to do?
That's incredible. Absolutely.
And the app is free. Costs you nothing.
Yeah, I'm on it. I'm literally on it. I think this sounds so cliche, but I'm on it all the time, just memorizing the amazing stuff that's on it. Now, how often do you guys save all those photos? And do you ever get photos of some unique phenotype or some, rare color morph or something that you would want to save as for future ID use?
So not really for future ID use, Phil, but what Luke is busy with is we can, in the next 2 years, double our knowledge of the distribution of snakes in South Africa through the app and through our Facebook pages. So any interesting distributional photograph that we see, we will then contact the person and verify, was it seen where you sent it from, or did you photograph it in your holiday and you're only sending it now?
Right.
So we double check on them. But we will probably, in the next 2 years, add another 30,000 records for distribution for snakes in South Africa.
Wow.
So that is significant.
Absolutely awesome. Absolutely awesome. I never forget the first time, because I go on the website all the time, and the little pop-up came on, and it says, "Have you seen our mobile app? You should download it. You like snakes? Click this button." And I did, and it's phenomenal. I can't speak highly enough about it.
We need to do that for the USA.
Yeah, we do. It's very difficult because I'm noticing it now more and more, where the ID groups for North American species are becoming more and more prevalent, but at the same time, the people that are contributing to it for the most part, they don't need it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And the people that are just killing the snake willy-nilly, they don't care. So until things start to evolve a little more mainstream wise in the US, at least, I don't think it would be that accepted as of yet, but I definitely see things like that coming. I do.
Yeah. So what we can see in South Africa is our snake tongue sales are virtually doubling every year.
Wow.
That's significant. So a lot of farmers who would in the past take out a shotgun, we have a 1.5 meter snake tongue, and we have a 2 meter snake tongue.
Yeah.
So the 1.5 meter one is the most popular one because you're just a little bit further away from the snake than a regular 1 meter snake tongue.
Right.
And they work really well.
Brilliant. And then now you have I was telling you earlier how much I love the travel containers and the nice cases, and now you have the takedown tongs, and awesome.
And it never stops. There's new products all the time. We just keep on developing and adding, and it's interesting.
I recently wrote, so Nipper and I are both contributors for a magazine, a free online magazine called the Herpetoculture Magazine. And I recently just wrote an article for transporting reptiles because so many people, they go to a reptile show and they buy, their ball python in a deli cup and they take it home. But what if you're transporting something that has that's venomous, or what if you're transporting something that needs particular maintained habitat throughout its transportation, whatever it be? And one of the greatest things is your tubes, and it's a brilliant idea. And I see all the videos of you guys using them and the photographs, and I actually mentioned the ASI and the tubes in the article. And
cool,
because just things like that, the things that you guys are doing of thinking outside the box and evolving techniques that we as herpers have come to know and love, and making it bigger and better every day, every year, it's phenomenal. I love it.
Did you see our electronic snake trap that we made?
Yes, I did. Very cool.
We sold a number of them, and we now have a module on the trap that the moment it traps a snake, it sends you a text message.
That's brilliant. I was actually meaning to ask you, how many other animals get caught in that accidentally?
Very few, because the way that we've done it is we have multiple sensors. So it's got a trigger off, we can set it.
Right.
It's got a trigger off more than one sensor. So if a bug or a rodent goes in, they can't trigger off two sensors, so they run out again. The trap doesn't close. And
the odds of a platysaurus sliding through it is slim to none.
We haven't had that yet.
Yeah. I like it. Incredible.
You've also got a massive range of really nice T-shirts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, really cool.
And we're expanding that all the time.
Yeah, I told Johan that after this, I'm going to send him an email because I've been procrastinating shopping. I see that rand conversion and international shipping, and I get a little terrified. But at this point, screw it. It's got to happen.
Oh, I've got some already. I rock them quite a lot. It's really, really good quality T-shirts, though. Really, the manufacturer, they're not the normal cheap. They're decent quality shirts.
We
look after that, guys. It's easier. Just come over and you just pick it up here. It's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
So, Mr. Johan, where can people find you?
Well, the easiest is you just Google Johan Marais and I pop up first.
Love it.
Otherwise, you can just Google African Snakebite Institute, and that'll pop up as well. So we're very, very easy to find. Snakes of Southern Africa Facebook page is our page, as is African Snakebite Institute. So we're really easy to find.
Awesome. Is there any other questions you may have, Nipper?
No, I'm blown away. That
I
was
know.
Phenomenal. I mean, I know how incredibly busy you are. We really do appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
100%.
We will put all the links in the bio for the Institute. Hopefully get some people to contribute, get some people to buy equipment, get some people to buy T-shirts and that sort of thing. It's a fabulous thing. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on. It's been amazing.
That's an absolute pleasure. I hope we can do this again.
100%. We're gonna convince you to come on for the Wrinkles Roundtable talks.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm in.
Perfect.
Well, ladies and germs, thank you all for listening to the Venom Exchange Radio. My name is Phil Wolf.
I'm Nipper Reed. It's been amazing.
And Johan Marais. Thanks, guys. My pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Next time, I think we have got... Who have we got coming on next? We have got the biggest English venomous keeper. We've got Peter Gibbons coming on. He's currently herping in Africa at the minute, I believe. He's gone mamba hunting. So we'll talk to him about that and his phenomenal collection of mambas, cobras, and various other bits and bobs. So we look forward to that one as well.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Keep in touch, guys. Many thanks.
Absolutely.
We will do. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, sir.